Hi, and welcome back to Criminology. Today's chapter is on socialization and crime. Let me give you a little story. On a cold winter day in 1938, a social worker walked quickly into a door of a rural Pennsylvania farmhouse, investigating a case of possible child abuse. The social worker entered the home and soon discovered that there was a 5-year-old girl hidden in a second-floor storage room. The child, whose name was Anna, was wedged into an old chair with her arms tied above her head so that she couldn't move. And she was wearing filthy clothes. Her arms and legs were as thin as matchsticks. Anna's situation was tragic. She was born in 1932 to an unmarried, mentally impaired woman of 26 who lived with her strict father. Angry about his daughter's illegitimate motherhood, the grandfather did not even want the child in his house, and for the first 6 months of her life, Anna was passed among several welfare agencies, but her mother was unable to pay for the care, and Anna was returned to the hostile home of her grandfather. To lessen the grandfather's anger, Anna's mother kept Anna in the storage room and gave her just enough milk to keep her alive. There she stayed, day after day, month after month, with almost no human contact, enduring for 5 years. Now, learning of the discovery of Anna, sociologist Kinsley Davis immediately went to her. He found her with local officials at a county home. Davis was stunned by the emaciated child who could not laugh, speak, or even smile. Anna was completely unresponsive, as if alone in an empty world. Unfortunately, Anna has not been the only child to have had this sort of experience. These examples do at least suggest that the ability to learn culture and become human is only a potential. To be actualized, socialization must unleash this potential. Now, this example was really only given to demonstrate that everyone needs interaction with other people in order to become human. Socialization is a sociological term, and it's defined as a lifelong process of social interaction with other people through which individuals, you and I, acquire a sense of who we are, self-identity, and the physical, mental, and social skills needed for survival in society, and essential for the survival and stability of society. Every human being is a product of two forces: heredity or biology, that's the nature, and the environment, nurture. Your text has a great example of, in the intro, the Skid Row CEO. Have a chance to look at that to get an idea how one's upbringing does not define who you will be in the future. It may define who you will be in the future, but it's not a guarantee. And the Skid Row CEO is a good example. So let's start by considering how criminologists view the role of socialization and how it contributes to the development of criminal behavior. Social processes theory contends that criminality is a function of individual socialization, and that's predominantly and firstly in the family, but peers, schools, church, or lack of religious background, and the interactions people have with organizations, institutions, and processes in society. So the social processes series all share one basic concept. All people, regardless of race or socioeconomic background, have the potential to become criminals. As is mentioned in your text, if poverty were the sole cause of crime, then indigent adults would be as criminal as indigent teenagers. However, research does not support that notion. What the studies are, other critical elements of socialization, it's known is sociology as agents of sociology. These are things that can influence us in our raising towards conformity or criminal activity. Most notably, family, school, peers, social institutions. However, additional agents could include the media, our workplaces, sports teams, religions. We will begin with the family. Family is the most important agent for children. Family is variable. You know, are you in an intact family with a mom and a dad? You have a single parent mom, single parent dad. Same-sex couple. There's a variety of variables about family. Our initial concept of self, our language, our beliefs, our sense of who we are, social class, our ethnic background, our geography, whether we live urban or rural, East Coast or West Coast, are all transmitted by family. And it all influences who we are. Now, some family issues to add are whether or not there's inconsistent discipline, poor supervision, supportive parent-child relationships are all associated with delinquency. Children with affectionate ties with their parents report greater levels of self-esteem beginning in their teens and continuing into adulthood. Good point here. High self-esteem is inversely related to criminal behavior. You have high self-esteem, you're not likely to behave in a criminal manner. Children as young as 2 whose parents are drug abusers exhibit personality defects such as excessive anger and negativity. Higher reports of delinquency are reported for children living in permanently disrupted families. Now, this could include divorce, separation, back together, an assault, and then the assault cycle. So it's very disruptive. And in particular, Indigenous children who were involved in child welfare system have greater involvement in the criminal justice system as adults. And now all that can contribute to who we think we are. Children who experience abuse, neglect, or sexual abuse are believed to be more crime-bound. Now, a second agent, family being the first, of socialization is one's educational experience. The relationship between educational achievement and criminality have been researched extensively. Finding the lack of interest and achievement in school and experiencing a feeling of alienation, so that to remember is anomie, affects children to be more likely to participate, more likely to attempt a crime. In addition, schools can also contribute to this criminality. It's through the process of what's known as labeling. Labeling can and does contribute to the criminality of children, thus exposing them to stigmatization. Excuse me. For example, in my school year, I was often addressed as being a troublemaker and a class disturber, but that label went with me all through high school. And it did affect my school achievement because I kept trying to meet that expectation. So we have to be very careful with what we say, because that was a stigmatization that became a part of my identity through high school. One significant meaning of stigmatization is through streaming. Now, I'll get into this because, again, I'm sorry I'm bringing this up and it's all about me, but I was streamed, and I'll get into that in a minute. It is with streaming that some children are identified as not being university or college material. Rather, you were streamed to an alternative manner with less opportunity. And that did happen. In my grade 9, I took everything that you were supposed to take, really did badly in math. Grade 10, they put me into a lower stream. In my years, you were either in a grade 9 to 13 program or a grade 9 to grade 12 program. Either you're going to university or going career. And I was then being streamed into career. I ended up finding my way into university in a very serendipitous way. But nonetheless, these are not guarantees either. Okay, let's look at the third group on this socialization group. We're going to look at peer relations. And peer groups, well, their greatest influence is in our adolescence. They usually are the one that we start to identify ourselves with and get a sense of identity from. And in adolescence, people who share common interests and social interests, a sense of belonging and self-worth are a large part of the socialization that the peers influence. Feeling that you belong. Peers enable us to explore ourselves separate from our families. We become more aware of what conforming means and the risks to not conforming. Should one not find connections with peers and they feel rejected, they are at greater risk of delinquency. Another institutional or agent, and we'll say this as an institutional involvement and belief. Institutions are a set of organized beliefs and rules that establish how a society will attempt to meet the basic needs of people. So historically, as I had mentioned earlier, 5 basic social institutions: family, religion, education, economy, government, and politics. So today, what I mentioned before as well, you can add media, sports, science, medicine, and military. Now, many of these social institutions will help bind us together and not engage in criminal behavior. However, not always and not for everybody. There are 3 independent branches of social process approach. There's social learning theory. This is where people learn the techniques and attitudes of crime from close relations with other criminal peers. Secondly, there's social control theory, which posits that everyone has the potential to become a criminal, but most people are controlled by their bonds to society. And then the third one we'll touch on is social reaction or labeling theory. And this claims that people become criminals when they receive that label from a significant member of society. You know, that could be such as a judge in a criminal trial. And they accept these labels as a key part of their personal identity. So we're going to start with the social learning theory. As mentioned, social learning theory in which people learn the techniques and attitudes of crime from close relationships with criminal peers. Now, one type of social learning theory is differential association theory. Regards crime as a behavior that is learned from others as a part of a socialization process. Another type of social learning theory is neutralization theory. It describes the neutralization techniques that offenders might use to justify their own criminal behavior. So let's have a look at a few of these. A differential association theory. Edwin Sutherland was the author of this important social learning theory. And it was introduced in 1939. And after Sutherland's death, his longtime associate, Donald Creasy, continued to further develop the differential association theory. And generally, this group views people who commit crime to do as a result of the perception that there is more in favor of committing crime than not. Sutherland and Creasy established 9 principles to explain this differential association theory. Now, for additional explanation of these, you go to 152 to 154, but I'm going to highlight them here. Criminal behavior is learned. That's one of the key additional points. Secondly, criminal behavior is learned as a byproduct of interacting with others. 3, learning criminal behavior occurs within intimate personal groups. You don't do it with strangers. 4. Learning criminal behavior involves assimilating the techniques for committing crime, including motives, drives, and rationalizations and attitudes. 5. The specific direction of motives and drives is learned from perceptions of various aspects of legal code as favorable or unfavorable. 6. A person becomes a criminal when he or she perceives more favorable than unfavorable consequences to violating the law. 7. Differential association may vary in frequency, duration, priority, and intensity. 8. The process of learning criminal behavior by association with criminal and anti-criminal patterns involves all mechanisms that are involved in any other learning process. So learning is learning. And then lastly, although criminal behavior expresses general needs and values, it is not excused by those general needs and values because non-criminal behavior also expresses the same need of mere imitation. So it has that differentiation. So differential association does not support a nurture rather than the nature explanation of criminal behavior. So next is the neutralization theory. Neutralization theory considers that those who violate law have learned how to neutralize the conventional values and attitudes, enabling them to drift back and forth between criminal behavior and conventional behavior. Basically, it's recognizing that even hardened criminals are also engaged in other conventional activities. Criminals go grocery shopping. They perhaps have a family and they go to church even. So it's mentioned in the definition that people who drift back and forth between conventional and antisocial behavior, the introduction to the concept of neutralization techniques would be employed to successfully drift. And you'll find the explanation of these on page 155 to 6. Now the following are research-based techniques of neutralization. Denial of responsibility, didn't do it. Denial of injury, didn't hurt. Blame the victim, it was you, not me. Condemnation of the condemners, it's you that's worse than me. And appeals to a higher loyalty, yeah, well, wait till your dad gets home. Now, we were going to move into the second of the three branches. That's the social process approaches, and we'll look at social control theory. Social control theory, which posits that everyone has the potential to become a criminal, but most people are controlled by their bonds to society. Now, this is achieved either by one's own self-control from within, or having been socialized to have a commitment to conformity. Now that's a very big part because conformity is a very entrenched element in human nature. There's been lots of research done on conformity in psychology, and largely we are driven to conform. It doesn't mean we don't, have individuality. But when I drive on the highway, I find that 99.9% of the drivers drive on the right side of the road. I think that's kind of good. According to Travis Hershey's social bond theory, crime occurs when the forces that bind people in society together are weakened or broken. Now, these social bonds are comprised of 4 critical elements: attachment, commitment, involvement, and belief. So attachment is about your connection and attachment with family, friends, and schools. There are important social bonds there, and that if these are not strong, it could lead to some people not respecting authority. Commitment is related to the time, the energy, and the effort that is expected in conventional actions, such as to get an education is going to take commitment, and saving money for your future to buy a house is going to take commitment. Thirdly is involvement. Heavy involvement in conventional activities can leave very little time for illegal behavior. Activities could include sports, teams, community activities, family activities, all that involvement can keep us from committing crimes. And then belief. Since people who live in the same social setting, neighborhoods, communities, often share the same moral beliefs. Should these beliefs be weakened or absent from some people is when there is an increased likelihood of criminal behavior. So check out Hirsch's results of tests in his hypothesis on page 159. Now the third and the final branch of social process theory is the social reaction theory, also known as labeling theory. Both social reaction theory and label theory are interchangeable. Social reaction labeling theory claims that people become criminals when they receive that label from significant members of society. And now that member of society could be a judge and a criminal trial of your trial. And they accept those labels as key part of their personal identity. So labeling theory is used to explain both the short-term and the long-term stigmatization consequences that can be part of an acquired negative label such as criminal. Labels are things we use to identify characteristics of others, some good, some not so much. Many of these labels are not evidence-based, but instead could be based on rumors, innuendo, even falsehoods, lies, if you will. These labels can be devastating and have long-term effect for some people. This process is identified in the image beside me and in your text. Social reaction theory views crime as a subjective concept defined by social reactions to the behavior and the subsequent effect of that reaction, not the moral content of the legal act itself. Differential enforcement is an important principle to labeling theory. This is the principle that posits that the law is differentially applied, benefiting those who hold economic and social power and penalize the powerless. The result can be seen in statistics that police are more likely to formally arrest males, minority group members, and those in lower class while using discretionary powers to give favorable groups a beneficial treatment. What sort of consequences of labeling might there be? Well, the whole process of attaching a negative label can have very negative effects on one's self-image. How do I see myself as being? That's self-image. This includes, for the labeled person, public denunciation, competency hearings, public trials, picture in the media, in some cases, labels like rapist or child molester, even separation from other inmates in the prison. So these are in your text. So, the change your self-image, that's all in your text. So I'm going to just do a quick review. Is being labeled can produce a reevaluation of self that reflects actual or perceived appraisals by others. Now this reevaluation can affect one's inner voice and how we see ourselves, and even to match the negative appraisals. I can remember working with a lot of children who became accustomed to accepting the negative labels they heard from teachers, peers, and family. I've seen kids who will accept the label that I am a loser because that's what they've heard. Joining deviant cliques. Now, coupled with the belief that you are the label, you may join others who share the label. Together, a clique can be a reward of the attitude and the values of delinquency as a social outcast, and they can revel in that in some cases. Retrospective reading. Well, when we are labeled, we can reassess our past to have it fit a current generalized label. So with the labeling process, there are two concepts to include. There's the primary deviance and secondary deviance. Now, primary deviance, maybe many of us have had primary deviance. This could represent an offense that any of us may have committed in our youth. However, we were not caught and maybe never committed that or any other crime again. Whereas secondary deviance, here we've committed a crime and people close to us or the social control agents, police, counselors, and teachers have applied a negative label to us. And that has long-term consequences to our self-identity and social interactions. Basically, we would be experiencing re-socialization into a deviant role. So what if any role has these theories had on policies? Social process theory has significant influences and direct modern social policy. Many efforts have been made to incorporate into social policies, such as the Head Start program, and has been utilized since 1960s. And in Canada, an Indigenous program had been developed. Current Canadian programs such as those built around diversion and restitution. Now, these use social process theories to justify programs that the public might otherwise view as too lenient on the offender. Diversion programs, these are strategies to remove offenders from the usual channels of the justice system and include them in rehabilitative programs in an effort to reduce the stigmatization that occurs. Whereas restitution, in these cases, instead of formal justice system restitution, lets the offender repay the victim as they do other useful and meaningful work in the community. All right, this brings us to the end of Chapter 7, Socialization and Crime, and next week we will be exploring Chapter 8, Social Conflict Theory, Power, Privilege, and Social Justice. All right, everybody. See you next week. Keep up the good work. Bye now.